All right. Hey, everyone.
Hi.
My name is Morgan Goodwin. I'm the mayor of Truckee and head coach at Progressive Coaching. And I'm here with Taylor Billings.
Hello.
And we have a fun program in store for you. Do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Taylor Billings. Thank you so much. I'm currently the press officer at Corporate Accountability International, a nonprofit based in Boston that challenges corporations and the life-threatening abuses they commit. Originally from New Orleans, got into organizing after discovering the effects of climate change that were had on not only the land I live on, but also the culture that I'm a part of. So that's why I'm here today. Yeah.
And so we're here at the Climate Hawks Vote training here in DC. There is a 100-person training going on in a building very nearby.
Mm-hmm.
It's very noisy, and they're on lunch right now. And so we are here to chat with you and entertain you and give you a little insight into what it's like here. And then we'll get into our next content session after this. But like we were just talking about, there's some amazing people here. Like,
yeah.
This is a room of powerful progressive voices, and it feels like there's just so much synergy and kind of acceleration potential out of this group, not just from like the fact that we're all going to be like win elections for office, but that we're going to do so with this much more kind of cohesive and like deeply grounded platform of climate and intersectionality and progressive politics.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's interesting to think about like cohesion and consistency across the movement. And how that's now become pretty integral. I feel like if you want to run as a progressive candidate, like intersectionality, racial justice, climate justice better be in your platform and in your priorities in a way that I mean I haven't seen prior, which I think is really, really interesting and something so valuable, especially from the people that were in the room.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's great.
And so tell me a little bit about the work that you do and how it intersects with electoral politics.
It's interesting. So I think in my current position, it's mostly a hobby. I just love electoral politics.
Because we're all kind of geeks about this stuff.
Yeah, because it's just like kind of fun. I love long hours and fast deadlines. No, but I think in my work, it's a C3, so obviously no ties explicitly, but in terms of how I think about our analysis and the way it applies to the the lives of people around the world. Governing bodies at the end of the day are, they have ideally the power to end the abuses that corporations conduct. And you can see that with big tobacco and the international treaty that prevented them from interfering with public health policy, and also, stop them from marketing directly to kids and directly marketing in general. The U.S. has not adopted that treaty, or not ratified it, but we don't ratify anything, so it doesn't really matter. But I think more broadly, at the end of the day, international governing bodies can be a really strong force in reining in corporate power if only we could get the right people in those positions. So it's really, to win the long game, you need to elect smart people who don't take corporate money and understand the immense influence that corporations have, and greenwashing and brand power and all that kind of stuff.
And that's kind of it's kind of the big story of government, right? It's like, we would not have seatbelts in our cars unless government stepped in and required it. Like the Cuyahoga River would still be catching fire unless government stepped in and said, look.
Maybe in a few months.
People's, right? And it's not always a straightforward line, but, we were talking about like Teddy Roosevelt earlier, because I'm deep in the middle of reading a biography of Teddy Roosevelt. And, as a Republican, in the turn of the, around the year 1900, the big fight within the Republican Party was some of the Republicans that said the government has no right to regulate anything about companies and corporations, how big they are, what the practices are. And then this group of progressive Republicans who said, look, basic stuff, like workers' comp.
Yeah, like, come on.
If you own a factory and you break somebody's leg off because you haven't maintained the machine, you have to pay that person's health care. Like, you have some responsibility here, right? And that was such a That was a hard fought battle, right? That took like years and years and years and like ugliness to play out.
Yeah.
And they won. That was the battle of the time.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the big stories that especially your work ties into is like, what's the kind of responsibility that government should be taking on now that is being fought by the companies that benefit from regulation, such as the right to emit as much CO2 as they want.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting you mentioned like workers' comp seems like obviously, and it's similar like, kids shouldn't, or like big tobacco shouldn't target children under the age of 10. It's like obviously. It's like that wasn't obvious before like still like a decades-long fight to keep the corporations from infringing on the rights of everyday people. So when you talk about government and like what the role of government is in society and what the role of the corporation is in society, none perhaps, or infinite, depending on where you live or depending on where you stand. It's an interesting balance.
And so what do you think, one of the things I love about politics is the fact that it ultimately is about personalities and the leadership and the choices that individuals make, right?
Mm-hmm.
In these fights, we have obviously we're people-powered movements, right? So it's not all about the one person, and yet we're here as people, trying to be better leaders, trying to be more effective. So I don't know. It's just that's the part of this work that I love, is those stories of people who really kind of take that brave stance, who kind of launch that impossible campaign, or who keep going despite defeat after defeat after defeat.
Yeah.
Like that's what makes up all these victories that we have.
Yeah. I think it's just like a little more cynical because it's like, why were there so many defeats, right? Like probably because someone was like paying off, like, right? I mean, like the defeat, so many of our defeats like are due to the like embedded, at least in the US, like the embedded corporate influence that we have just like baked into our government. Because the government was built to serve people that didn't look like, it definitely didn't look like most Americans, and like definitely, didn't look like me. And it's certainly not for any person of color or immigrant, So I think there's like it's like a longer term question of like why those defeats happen and like in what way to be smarter campaigners and also like run better campaigns. But like agreed, I think a lot of politics is like reflecting on why those things happen and building stronger races to move forward. And we saw the energy like of that today in the room, right? Like we've been squashed in all, like into for lack of a better term, and yet there's still this like incredible growth and self-reflection that makes us better organizers, better voters, better people. I think in the long term.
Yeah. So, yeah. An analogy, an analogy I've used a lot recently, or I've been thinking of a lot is, so I'm sure we've all, a lot of sort of stories of people who have gotten cancer, right? Who've gotten some kind of life-threatening illness. And that, is a huge moment in somebody's life, and it's often a very scary moment, an existential moment, and the road to recovery is often long and painful. And something that's, again, very common in these stories is that people kind of gain this level of kind of gracefulness, and like they learn something about themselves, like they become better people because of this experience. Now, it would be insane to ever wish cancer on somebody.
Yeah. Like you need to become a better person.
And yet, like given that it happens, like you can either just kind of give up and crawl in a hole and hide, or you can be like, okay, I'm going to be a better person now.
Yeah. We're going to have a whole lot of better people now that the EPA is gone. So, no, I think that's an interesting point there.
So I think that's what we're all doing right now. We're recovering from our collective cancer.
Yep, that's it.
That's a great image.
So there is a live chat. If you are tired of our antics, you can ask questions to one or both of us in the live chat, and we will see them. I need to grab my water bottle. So
Go for it.
you can pull up. I don't know if it shows there. You might have to go do it on YouTube.
So, this is really a treat for me. I serve as mayor of a pretty small town in not a particularly political area of the country, and so a lot of the politics that I do is very local. As mayor, we've launched a large initiative this year to work on locals housing in Truckee. Like a lot of places, but particularly pronounced where we are, the price of housing is something like the median home price is 10 times the median family income, whereas nationally that number is about 3 times or 4 times, right? So we're wildly buying a home is wildly out of reach for the vast majority of people who live where we are. So we get to deal with that. We get to deal with, I get to work on things like, the state has passed a marijuana legalization. Recreational marijuana is legal in California. It's up to cities to decide, how do you want to regulate this? It's like, you could do anything. You could ban it. You could say you only allow one store. You could say we're going to allow big warehouses. There's a whole economic, social, political question there that I get to, my job literally is to preside over these meetings, is to try and build consensus among my fellow council members as to what the right course of action is for the community. And similarly, we've launched a climate action planning process that we're a couple of years in, and we've made the decision to go sort of deep, quote unquote. So we're taking it very seriously. We're looking at climate action planning as an integral part of our town's general plan, which was already due for a rewrite in 2018. And so even though I at first wanted to make a climate action plan, like set a goal of, we're going to go 100% clean, now, it's balancing that value of making that statement or commitment versus what if we could bring climate change into the entire general plan. And so when we write our transportation plan, we are making sure that climate's a part of it. When we're doing our housing plan, we're building in our emissions as part of our housing. And so that's just, it's one of those interesting choices, and it's one of the reasons why I'm just like running for city council in Truckee was one of the best decisions I've ever made, was because those types of conversations are so interesting and they're so important.
Yeah.
And the answers are not at all black and white.
Yeah.
Like, what is the right answer to that? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
We're charting new territory here in 2017 as Americans in a climate change Trump world.
Yeah. What a world to be forging new paths. So what are some of the, like, affordable housing is clearly one of the biggest issues I feel like you've mentioned repeatedly. So in terms of how your people are talking about it and like sharing those stories, which resonate most with you, and how, who have you heard from, and how are those stories told so often?
I'd say the most common story we hear is I've lived in this town for 15 years. I have kids in my school system. The home that I rent is now being sold and I have to move. I can't find a place in Truckee and I have to move out of the area. We're losing teachers, we're losing kids out of the school system. That fabric of the community that everyone will say that the reason that they live there is sort of the uniqueness of the natural environment and the uniqueness of the community. It's a really strong community that's getting pulled apart. I don't like the word gentrification simply because it means so many different things to so many different people. But those dynamics are the kind of things that are at play.
Yeah.
It's, as a place gets more desirable, people with more money want to live there, housing prices go up, and the people who often made it desirable simply by being who they are often suffer.
Yeah.
And so there's a couple of ways to counter that that are all kind of complicated. The least complicated one is simply adding more housing to the supply. Right?
Yeah.
Your demand is increasing, your supply should increase. And there's a lot of constraints for us doing that. We're surrounded by federal lands, that is open space, it's a natural environment that we love. Doing quote unquote infill development, I've learned in my role as mayor, is there's a reason why it's harder, right? It literally is more work to do infill development than to clear a new patch of forest and build a big building.
Yeah, but like, don't do that.
No, exactly. We're not doing that.
Yeah.
But the fact that we're not doing that, and the fact that the infill development is taking longer than we should, means that we are experiencing a crisis, right? There's real costs to this. And so, just getting into the machinery of kind of government and bureaucracy and figuring out how can we move this project forward? How can we get the state commission to approve this infrastructure plan? How can we line up the financing to do this?
Yeah.
I got a little off track there, but the reason why I find housing to be particularly interesting is that for Truckee and for a lot of the country, housing is an unbelievably large climate change issue. And this is something that I don't think a lot of climate change activists fully grasp, is how important cities are. We spend a ton of time thinking about national policy, and it is unbelievably important. It's hugely necessary. And state action, I think, also gets overlooked. But cities control how things get built, how people get around, and how literally how our economies function, which are actually what produces greenhouse gases. And every time you can move, 1,000 families from outside the suburbs into the city, you're taking a huge number of cars off the road. Every time we can build housing for people who work in Truckee to actually live there, we're saving, it's 45 miles each way through a narrow, steep canyon that often has snow on it. So there's a safety and human factor there.
Yeah.
We're also saving the carbon emissions that comes from all that transportation.
Yeah.
And so getting involved in building local housing and in road systems and road networks that don't rely on automobiles has become the kind of cutting edge of my climate change activism in a lot of ways. And it's always grounded in this national movement. But the kind of day-to-day, like, what does it mean to implement this stuff is great work. And that's part of this whole shtick, right, is convincing all of you that even though the big sexy offices to run for are often not cities and counties, it is an unbelievably rewarding and meaningful place to work, and it is also very strategic to be the first kind of office that you work for.
Yeah. So so you were on city council beforehand?
Yeah, I ran for city council in 2014.
Okay. Great.
So, questions welcome. All of you out there, jump on in. Questions for either of us. What do you think? What's the biggest campaign you're working on right now?
So I love my role at this organization because I get to work on all of them. So we have 4 major campaign areas: food, water, climate, and tobacco. And so right now, our food work is really taking off. We run a campaign called Value the Meal, which challenges McDonald's and their child-targeted marketing, which is particularly insidious in schools and hospitals.
Value the meal.
Yeah,
I get it. Took me a second.
The V is in brackets even, so it helps you kind of make that jump. So we work. Have you ever heard of McTeachers Nights?
No.
Okay, y'all, they're awful. They're so bad. So McTeachers Nights are this crazy event, so cleverly branded for McDonald's. Teachers Nights. But McDonald's actually has teachers work behind the counters of McDonald's restaurants in like branded T-shirts and hats, and sells the junk food to their students.
What?
Yeah, in exchange for poultry funds. Like,
where does this happen?
Across the U.S. We've recorded over 700 events in more than 40 states. It's insane, and
it's one of those like that can't possibly be happening in my town.
And it's like it really is. I don't know about Turkey, but like
I'm gonna go look into this.
Maybe, yeah. So I don't know it offhand, but it's insane, and it's tragic because McDonald's markets it as a fundraiser, but only gives about $1 to $2 per student typically. So usually well under $1,000. One thing per student. Two, they get teachers to market the junk food to students who are already expected to have a shorter lifespan than their parents for the first time in the history of this generation. They're more likely, 1 in 3 children born in the year 2000 are set to develop type 2 diabetes. And meanwhile, McDonald's is like driving the train to market this incredibly unhealthy food directly to children when they can't tell the difference between advertising and reality. When they see their teachers selling it, or they see it in the hospital and they're like, oh, like that must be good. Meanwhile, McDonald's put out a kale salad that had more calories or fat, it was more unhealthy than a double Big Mac, and it was just like, y'all.
Oh, it's like the ranch dressing.
Yeah, it's like, come on. Yeah, it's just like, it's mayonnaise. Just mayonnaise. Yeah. So anyway, McTeachers Nights is one of our biggest projects.
How do you stop a McTeachers Night?
Well, so over 50 teachers unions across the U.S. have signed on to denounce McTeachers Nights, which is huge. So we really like a lot of local organizing, protesting, just like also just building up the awareness of these events, since they're like kind of slinky, like it's hyper local. They don't do like a big national program. It's really under wraps as McDonald's is trying to shift their advertising game, as like a progressive modern burger company. They're kind of like quieting down on their school targeted marketing. But just recently, a couple weeks ago, Los Angeles Unified School District, the second largest in the country, banned McTeachers Nights.
Awesome.
Yeah. So it includes teachers unions, parents, educators, and now school districts to really call on McDonald's to stop. McDonald's is actually ignoring the current policy in place in Los Angeles. They had a no junk food sponsorship policy. They currently do, and McDonald's had still put on like over 80 teachers' nights while they had those guidelines in place. So it took another resolution from the school board to be like, no, seriously, y'all.
You find that school boards or unions, the kind of bigger drivers, or the more effective like pushback on the teachers' nights?
Interesting. I think they're easier to communicate with and like faster. It's just like less of a process, it seems. I just joined the organization a couple months ago, so that's like my sense that school boards, it's just like a lot. It's government, right? So it takes a lot to go through that. And also McDonald's executives are everywhere, right? So a McDonald's executive just got into a school board in Illinois. So like, they're probably not going to ban McTeachers Nights anytime soon.
Well, if the union's against it.
Yeah, right, so maybe. But yeah, so anyway, it's an interesting conversation.
I mean, it's my, like, political education continues. I think that not being sort of a union person, like not having family members that were in unions, and it's sort of foreign territory to me. I'm really eager to learn. But I think I'm getting a whole new respect for like the fundamentally civic nature of unions. Like everyone knows that like your school board is like a civic function, but unions are political organizations, and that's like where a lot of political power is. Even as weak as unions are in today's America compared to the last couple of generations, just like we can talk about how to kind of join your local party, your local Democratic Party, and kind of build leadership and power in that kind of context. I think that for the people in the room today, kind of if there is a local union to joining it, like if there is, kind of just respecting how important those civic institutions are. I think is really important for all of us.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't know much about labor organizing at all. It's such an art. I think it's an incredible.
Yeah.
And as we think about May Day coming up tomorrow, and the organizing that takes place not only with like the unions but also with immigrant workers. I mean, it's just it's exceptional, and such a work is so closely tied to identity, especially in the U.S. that when you start to like mess with it or like threaten it at all through like civil disobedience or like striking for like human rights and like fair treatment, it gets like, oh God, $15 living wage. I'm sorry, what living wage? Yeah, so it's just like these like crazy ideas, but it's something that's like I feel it in my limited experience. It's something that's like very deeply personal. But we'd have to get a labor organizer on here to dig into that.
Well, there's a book I would recommend to you that I read over the fall, actually during our kind of through the election.
Oh yeah.
That had a profound effect on me. It's by academic researcher named Jane McElvey. It's called No Shortcuts: Organizing for Power in the New Gilded Age. And so let me give you the pitch on it really quickly.
Okay.
Jane.
Are you being paid by Jane? I need full disclosure.
I'm not being paid by Jane.
Okay, great.
Not better, although I want to have her on the podcast.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Jane.
So Jane, if you're watching right now, it's the premise of the book is great because it is a book about labor organizing battles in the 21st century. So most people think of the labor movement as something that happened.
Yeah.
And now it's kind of just
it's like the civil rights.
What's it doing now? Like,
yeah.
I don't know. We don't hear about labor victories in today's era. And so she goes through. She looks at about a dozen case studies of really significant victories. Nursing homes, the Chicago Teachers Union strike. There's the unionization of a giant meat packing slaughterhouse in the South. I forget if it's Georgia or North Carolina, but and she like really just gives you the case studies, like gives you the like play-by-play of like what was effective organizing in these places where organizing was like the hardest conditions.
Yeah.
Like we as sort of climate change organizers, political activists, like we do organizing. Sometimes it's tough.
Yeah.
But what can we learn from the places where it's like truly inhospitable?
Yeah.
Like where you will get fired if your employer even thinks that you're trying to start a union. Because that still happens. Even though that's illegal.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I'll read it.
And did I get you?
Yeah, okay.
And then the last point she makes, and then I'll shut up on this, is that just the observation that the progressive movement has grown to see itself as a separate thing from the labor movement. And she's just wondering why that is. Like, why does your human rights, environment, abortion, healthcare fights get lumped into a bucket, largely called kind of, human rights advocacy, and then labor's over here? Why is there that divide when this should be a more, like we were talking about, a more cohesive, unified movement with a larger platform across the country?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's interesting as we talk about the messaging around the people's climate mobilization this past weekend, like climate jobs justice, right? Like jobs entering that conversation back into the movement is just like, because I mean, the environmental movement is like white and elitist, right? Like it has been for so many years. Like hopefully
we can start saying was white and elitist.
Yeah, right. Okay, I should say. Yeah, but like, I mean, I hope. Yeah, but it
because yesterday was awesome.
Yeah, yesterday was great. But like, as like someone who's always been included in the movement, like I don't know, like I thought it was super welcoming, but like, who am I to say? Of course it was. So I think anyway, as we talk about labor and I hate to say corporate influence again, but like the role corporations play in manipulating their workers in like, if you don't work on this pipeline, like you will be fired and no one will ever hire you again. Like that type of intimidation work that happens, I'm sure when, or like the fear of losing your job. It's like coal miners. I mean, like they need a job, right? Like it's actually, do you listen to The Daily?
No.
It's a 15-minute podcast by the New York Times, by Michael Barbaro, and he does interviews in the morning. But he had a really interesting one with a coal miner who was like, you've never been here. Like, you don't know why I love this job. You don't know how it served my family. You don't know how I feel that that Obama has taken away my livelihood. Even though, like what Jackie was saying this morning, like there have been hundreds of thousands of deaths due to coal mining because of the black lung and like manipulation of healthcare because of it. So I lost my point. I just got too excited. But I think it's just like labor back into the climate movement is so important. And two, like there is corporate manipulation of the workforce to not buy into the like hashtag progressive ideas or whatever that we need so desperately unification on. That's like kind of convoluted.
So here's a question, just to make it nice and simple. What did you do in the 2016 election cycle, and what did you learn?
Yeah, so, okay, I worked with Next Gen Climate in Ohio. Okay. So I was, what did I actually do? So I was the deputy field director of the state. So I was second in command on our field staff. That's what I did.
For Next Gen Climate?
For Next Gen Climate, yeah.
For our viewers who don't know what Next Gen
which is a super PAC, which was like very bizarre. I'd never worked for a super PAC before, and very interesting like space to be in, given how I feel about money in politics. I don't think there should be a lot of money in politics. Spoiler. So working for a super PAC,
working for a lot of money,
and like working someone, especially like Tom Steyer, who's such a leader in the progressive space, but is like a very, very wealthy man. And a white man, and just like thinking about how that fits in. But anyway, I like broad strokes. I learned so much from Next Gen about organizing and about management and about like work ethic, and about like political electoral staffers' rights and things like that, and like access to people and like conversations that I've never had before. I also learned what it was like to never sleep, like all of us do on elections, you know. I mean, I think it was like very much that. And I also learned what it was like to be handed a lot of responsibility with a lot of urgency. And it was beautiful. I mean, there were like high points and low points, but I look back on it very fondly. What I learned from the outcome of the election is that one, I think candidate matters. Like your candidate matters, and that also, I hate to say corporations, but like corporations matter. Like the Democratic Party is just as corporate as the Republican Party in many ways,
right? And
that not that like Bernie would have won, but like it's just like we don't live in a system in which. In that moment, I don't think we lived in a system where Bernie could have even gotten to the place where he could have won because of the rigid system that wouldn't have let anyone but Hillary become our nominee. That's like where I feel like, yeah, like if he would have gotten through, he would have won, but we don't live in a world where he could have gotten through. Yeah. And that's a shame. Now that might not be true for 2018, might not be true for 2020, but like it was true for this past election.
And I think that insight there, just to like underline it, because I have a lot of respect for that, is that, you know, politics is like the state of the world as it is.
Yeah, yeah.
Like doing this work is like, okay, what is the reality right now? And like, how do I be strategic given the way the world is?
Yeah.
Not.
Yeah.
And you can hold that and also hold the way the world should be. But getting those two mixed up is a recipe for unhappiness.
Yeah, right. Well, that's why I think it's so interesting working with, like, hearing from Working Families Party this morning and all of us and these organizations that are electoral in nature, but like so the vision of the future is so central to their mission and their work every day, and I think they blend it in a really interesting fashion in the way they talk about their campaigns and talk about their staff and talk about themselves. It's like a really beautiful mixture. Anyway,
I'd say that's probably one of my biggest like wishes for the Democratic Party, is what I would like to see, is more of that, like acknowledging the way the world is and the way the party is, especially vis-a-vis the corporate influence, and also still being kind of brave enough to say, even though this is where we are, like we're just looking forward to a vision for the future that's a little bit braver and unapologetic, as one of the speakers this morning was talking about. This weekend is such a good like boost. Like I'm already feeling like inspired to go back and
ready to go,
kind of lift the sights higher, right? and kind of aim a little bigger.
So how did you find this training? So I guess Dominic reached out, or
so I've known Brad Johnson and Whit Jones with Lead Locally and R.L. Miller,
just all your people
with Climate Hawks. For years. I mean,
got it.
So we'll do a little history lesson here, right? Let's see, it's 2007.
Set the scene.
The last time we had a
Razor phones are still a thing.
Razor phones were still a thing.
Yeah.
And we had a contested primary on both sides, right? Because George Bush was turned out.
Yeah.
And you had Hillary Clinton.
I was a freshman in high school.
And Barack Obama and John Edwards. Remember John Edwards?
I do.
Yep. Those were the big three Democratic contenders. You also had you had like a dozen Democrats, and the Republicans were also there. And so with a bunch of other folks, I spent the summer in New Hampshire organizing a march across the state of New Hampshire. So March to Re-Energize New Hampshire. And we got...
Is it the formal title?
Yeah.
I feel like you... Did you learn something from that? Okay. Sorry, yeah.
We did, in fact.
Okay, cool.
And we had a march to Re-Energize Iowa. It was going at the same time, right? These are two primary states.
Yeah.
We're like, if we can demonstrate that thousands of people are marching across the states for climate change,
the
candidates
really cool.
have to take notice. And if we'd had thousands of people marching, we absolutely would have had a huge impact. Having a couple dozen people marching, we learned a lot. But the people who were there that summer, have gone on to lead, the Energy Action Coalition, the Power Shift Network, the founders of 350.org were all part of that. I slept in a tent and on a church floor with Bill McKibben, right? And you're just kind of walking along the street.
Yeah.
But he was a big, anyway. Now I'm just
name dropping. So I know.
Just gonna name drop all these climate activists.
No, that's.
But there's the sense that this is the work that we've been doing and doing it long enough that even though our lives have taken these random twists and turns, it's coming back to trainings like this is re-energizing because it reminds me that we're all still on the team.
Yeah.
The tribe is the identity is there.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too because had that march not happened, thank God y'all did do that because we wouldn't have been able to do this march today had y'all not learned valuable lessons from 15 people.
Literally some of the same organizers for that march helped organize.
Yeah, they're all right, don't name it. Re-energize anything. We're not doing that.
Washington.
Yeah. I think that's not important. Cool. All right, so I think that's all we have time for.
Okay.
So I've heard.
We've talked to our viewers about.
Our job here is done, so nice job. We nailed it.
We're having fun here, and we're glad you're with us. And we're going to switch into, we're both going to split up and do another skills training. I'm going to be talking about how to construct your stump speech and your political platform, how to go through that process.
Yeah, and then I'll be talking about how to build a field team and how to train and inspire your volunteers to help you in your campaign.
I secretly wanted to do that one. But
it's so fun.
You can do it.
Okay,
and then we will say goodbye, but then you all can tune in back to the main plenary session and watch some of our closing speakers, and we'll be all together despite our geographic separation.
It's like a mile. It's not a huge deal. Okay, cool. All right, y'all. Thank you so much.
All righty.
Bye.